Jai Gurudev. Let us begin with chapter number 1, which talks about the yoga of irresolution and grief, that is Vishad Yoga. Dhritarashtra said, assembled at Kurukshetra, the field or sphere of Dharma. Dharma is not only moral virtues and good works, but the essential character that enables a thing or being to be its own self. At Dharmkshetra and eager for combat, O Sanjay, what did my and Pandu's sons do? Dhritarashtra is the very image of ignorance, and Sanjay is the embodiment of self-restraint. Ignorance lurks at the core of the objective, the outward-looking mind. With his mind enveloped in darkness, Dhritarashtra is blind since birth, but he sees and hears through Sanjay, the epitome of self-control. He knows that God alone is real, but as long as his infatuation for Duryodhan, born from ignorance, lasts, his inner eye will be focused on the Kaurav, who symbolize the ungodly forces of negative, sinful impulses. The human body is a field for combat. When there is abundance of divinity in the realm of the heart, the body is transmuted into a Dharmkshetra, that is, the field of Dharma. But it degenerates into a Kurukshetra when it is infested with demonical powers. Kuru means do. The word is an imperative. As Krishna has said, driven by the three properties, that is, sattva, tamas and rajas. The three gun or properties are or constituent qualities of all material objects and beings. Sattva is virtue or the quality of goodness. Tamas is ignorance or darkness, and rajas is passion or moral blindness. Born out of Prakriti, that is nature, man is compelled to act. Without action, he cannot even live for a moment. These properties, virtue, ignorance, and passion, compel him to act. Even in sleep, action does not cease, for it is necessary sustenance for the body. The three properties bind men from the level of gods to that of the lowest creatures, such as worms. So long as the material world and its properties are Kuru must be, that is, the doing will never cease. Therefore, the sphere of birth and death of that which is evolved from a previous source or Prakriti is Kurukshetra, whereas the sphere of righteous impulses which guide the self to God, the highest spiritual reality, is Dharmkshetra. Archaeologists are engaged in research in Punjab, Kashi and Prayag to locate Kurukshetra. But the poet of the Gita has himself suggested through Krishna where the war of his sacred poem was fought. This body is itself, O Arjuna, a battlefield, and one who conquers it grows spiritually dexterous by perceiving its essence. He then elaborates the structure of this battlefield sphere of action constituted of 10 perceptors. And what are these 10 perceptors? The 10 organs of senses, 5 of perception, gyanendriya, and 5 organs of action, that is karmendriya, the objective and the subjective mind, the ego, the 5 elements, that is primary substances, and the 3 properties. The body itself is a field, a ring, or an arena. The forces that clash on this field are twofold: the godly and the ungodly, the divine and the devilish, the offspring of Pandu and those of Dhritarashtra, the forces that are congenial to the essentially divine character of the self and those which offend and demean it. The clue to the mystery of the conflict between the opposed impulses begins to be seen when one turns for enlightenment to an exalted sage who has enriched himself with worship and meditation. This field belongs to one who realizes its essence, and the war fought on it is the only real war. History is crowded with wars of the world, but the victors in these wars have but sought in vain for a permanent conquest. These wars were nothing beyond acts of retribution. True victory lies in subduing matter and in perceiving as well as becoming one with the Supreme Spirit that transcends it. This is the only conquest in which there is no prospect of defeat. This is true salvation after which there are no fetters of birth and death. The mind lying in the abyss of ignorance perceives through one who has mastered the mind and the senses and thus knows what has transpired on the battlefield, where fighters include even those who have known its reality. Vision is ever in proportion to mastery of the mind and the senses. To the dialogue which the thrush made in the first stanza, Sanjay replies. Sanjay said, at the time, after having seen the Pandav army standing in battle array, King Duryodhan approached his teacher Dronacharya and spoke thus. Dual conduct itself is Dronacharya. When the awareness dawns that we are alienated from God, there arises in the heart an acute hunger for the attainment of that exalted spirit. Only then do we set out to seek an accomplished teacher, a realized sage, or a guru. The Sanskrit equivalent here is guru, an ideal teacher. The function of such a teacher, as it is understood in Hindu thought, is twofold. He, of course, elucidates the scriptures, but what is more important, he also teaches by the example of his own life. Between the two opposed impulses, this awareness is the first initiator into wisdom, although the teacher of ultimate excellence will be Yogeshwar Krishna. To grasp the spirit of Gita, it is important to keep in mind that Krishna is a mortal as well as God. Vishnu, equivalent to Brahma, the Supreme Spirit, in his eighth incarnation, himself an adept in yoga, that which unites the self with the Supreme Spirit. Yogeshwar is an adept in yoga. King Duryodhan, an embodiment of excessive attachment to worldly objects, goes to his teacher. Attachment is at the root of all griefs, indeed their sovereign. It tempts one away from the spiritual treasure, and so it is named Duryodhan. Only the sole property is the stable property, and it is attachment which generates impurity in it. It draws one to the material world, but it also provides the primary motive for enlightenment. Inquisitiveness is possible only as long as there is attachment, or else only the impeccable spirit remains. So, after having seen the Pandav army arrayed, that is, after having glimpsed the righteous impulses that are in tune with the self, Duryodhan, a victim of attachment, goes to his teacher Dronacharya and says, Behold, O Master, this massive army of Pandu's sons marshalled in battle formation by your wise pupil, the son of Drupad, that is Drishtadyuman. Drishtadyuman, the son of Drupad, is the steadfast mind that treasures faith in the universal, immutable reality. He is thus the master, the type of righteous impulses that lead to selfless activity in a spirit of egoless reverence to spiritual divinity. Not means, but the determination of mind needs to be firm. Let us now review the Pandav army at length. Here in the army are many valiant archers, Yuyudhan, Virat, and the great martial commander Drupad, who are worthy match for the brave Arjun, Bhim, and others. This army is composed of those who can guide souls to the Supreme Spirit, like Bhim, who is an embodiment of resolute sentiment, the image of tender devotion, Arjun, and many other valiant warriors such as Satyaki, endowed with goodness, Virat, and the great warrior leader Drupad, symbolizing consistency and steadfastness on the path of spirituality, and Ketu, Chekitan, and the mighty king of Kashi, as well as Purujit and Kunti Bhoj and Shaiba, the unparalleled among men, and further Ketu and the steadfast in duty, Chekitan, who can rein in his straying thought and concentrate it on the Supreme Spirit, the king of the holy city of Kashi, an emblem of the sacredness that resides within the world of the body. Purujit, the one who obtains victory over matter in all its forms, gross, subtle, and instrumental. Kunti Bhoj, who conquers world life by doing what is worthy of doing. Then Shaibya, of virtuous conduct. The valorous Yudhmanyu, the mighty Uttamauj, Sobdar, and Draupadi's 5 sons, all great warriors. The heroic Yudhmanyu, of warlike temper. Uttamauj, with the spirit of abandon that flows from sacred excellence. Abhimanyu, Subhadra's son, with a mind without fear because it is propped up by righteousness, and the 5 sons of Draupadi, who herself is a form of discernment of the divine. All are great warriors named tenderness, beauty, compassion, spiritual repose, and consistency. All of them are noted for their ability to traverse the path of spiritual fulfillment with perfect skill. Duryodhan thus enumerates to his teacher about a score of names from the side of the Pandav which represent some vital principles of divine excellence. Although the monarch of impulses that are alien to the essentially spiritual character of the self, it is ignorance or attachment that first motivates us to strive for the realization of the treasure of divinity. As for his own side, Duryodhan dwells on it but briefly. Had it been an actual external war, he would have given an elaborate account of his army. But only a few perversions are cited, but they have to be conquered and they are destructible. There are mentioned only about half a dozen of these, at the heart of all which there yet dwells an unworldly propensity. Be it known to you, O the worthiest of the twice born because of the spiritual birth or awakening that comes through self study and contemplation. Brahmins, the names of those who are most eminent amongst us, the chiefs of our army, these I name for your information. The worthiest of the twice born, that is how Duryodhan addresses his teacher Dronacharya, because he introduces to him the chiefs of his army. The worthiest of the twice born would hardly be an appropriate term of address for a commander in chief if the war were a physical external war. In fact, the Gita dwells upon the conflict between contradictory innate impulses, upon the dual conduct which is Dronacharya. The world of matter exists and there is duality if we are even in the least isolated from God. However, the urge too for overcoming this duality of object spirit is derived first from the teacher Dronacharya. It is imperfect knowledge that induces the hunger for enlightenment. It is now time to have a look at the leaders of the impulses which are hostile to the essentially sacred character of the self. And from here we will cover in the next session. We will now begin with the sound healing and meditation. Jai Gurudev.